February 21st, 1994, a tidy clapboard house in Arlington, Virginia, a Jaguar flashes in the driveway. Suited agents approach the front door with a warrant in hand. Inside, Aldrich Ames pours coffee, pins on a tie, and faces the end of a life built on secrets. Cameras pop, neighbors watch. It is the day a mole is exposed, a mole who handed names of covert sources to Moscow, and in doing so, changed lives forever. How does a quiet counterintelligence analyst become the single thread that unravels decades of clandestine work? What pressures bend a loyal officer into betrayal? And when the ledger is balanced in cash, who pays the human cost? If you want deep investigations into the way systems fail, hit like and subscribe. Aldrich Ames joined the CIA in the late 1960s. He learned Russian. He learned tradecraft. He rotated through assignments that put him near the key files, the lists of sources, the travel plans, the means of communication. Those rotations built trust. They also built access. In intelligence work, access is everything. A case officer who touches the names of covert assets holds a moral obligation. Protect the people who risk everything to inform you. Ames had that access. He also had ordinary human flaws: debt, desire for status, a taste for comfort. Those flaws would grow into cracks. A comfortable life, a dangerous choice. Why betray your country? For Ames, the motive was not ideology, it was money, and the slow rationalizations that made betrayal seem possible. He lived beyond his pay. A nice car, cosmetic work, weekend meals out, mortgages that required explanation. In the mid-1980s, opportunistic approaches began. Visits to the Soviet embassy, discreet meetings, envelopes exchanged in hotel lobbies. At first, the payments were a relief. They cleared debt. They fixed a problem. Then they became routine: cash purchases, hush payments, small deposits. Over nearly a decade, investigators later established that Ames accepted well over $2 million for information. Numbers reported around $2.5 million by some accounts. But the money explains only the transaction. It does not explain the moral degradation. How does a man trained to be suspicious choose instead to be secretive in the wrong way? How does he justify that every name handed to an adversary is not a person, but a line on a ledger? Tradecraft turned to treachery. Ames did not act like a spy in a novel. His methods were mundane and effective. He met handlers in public places where cameras and witnesses blended into background noise. He used dead drops or middlemen. He accepted cash in envelopes to avoid wire transfers. He staggered deposits into accounts and purchased assets with cash to mask a paper trail. He compartmentalized his life, official and unofficial, separate and opaque. These steps are not brilliant. They are the sort of low-technology concealment that works when oversight is superficial and assumptions about loyalty run deep. The agency had checks, but they were not always applied rigorously enough. A man of seniority can benefit from an institutional courtesy that mistakes rank for integrity. The price of a name. Between the mid-1980s and 1994, Ames supplied Moscow with operational details: names of assets, reports of handler contacts, communication methods, and timing. Each item was a weapon against human networks. The KGB used those names and details to arrest sources, dismantle safe networks, and squeeze other assets. This is where the abstract becomes visceral. A betrayed asset might be arrested at dawn, taken from family, interrogated, beaten, possibly executed. Another might vanish without notice. Networks carefully built over years can collapse in weeks. Men and women who trusted the CIA's protective promise found themselves exposed because one official accepted cash. Estimating the damage is ugly math. Some official accounts speak of a dozen or so agents lost. Other investigations place the number higher, 24 or more. The exact number has nuance and uncertainty, but the moral clarity is simple. Each exposed name was someone whose life dramatically shifted, often for the worse. The slow discovery. How do you find a mole in an organization built to hide things? Not with high drama, but with patient detection. Investigators followed money. They examined deposit patterns, mortgage records, and spending behavior. They checked travel logs and cross-referenced meetings. The breakthrough came from noticing something small and persistent. An analyst living beyond the means his salary supported. That single anomaly became a thread. Analysts and auditors stitched together bank statements, hotel logs, and meeting records. The pattern grew until it could not be ignored. The arrest in 1994 was the result of methodical, sober work, the kind of desk-based investigation that rarely gets Hollywood attention but prevents further disasters. The forensic paper trail. The investigators who found Ames were not cinematic spies. They were accountants and analysts who treated paperwork as evidence. They pulled travel manifests from airline logs, matched hotel folios with embassy visit windows, and cross-referenced meal receipts with access logs. Hotel concierge lists, once the domain of hospitality, became leads. Bank deposit stamps were magnified into timelines. A $400 deposit here, a cash withdrawal timed with a Moscow contact there. Those little marks formed a map. Financial forensics was central. Investigators ran timeline matrices. Where was an analyst at 2 p.m. on a given date? Who met whom at a certain hotel? Which phones pinged near a restaurant where a known embassy contact lunched? It is slow, painstaking work, but it cannot be rushed. The compelling thing is this: intelligence failures are often redressed by mundane diligence. Polygraphs and interviews followed. Colleagues were re-interviewed under new light. Logs that had once seemed irrelevant were combed again. In the end, the case was built not on speculation, but on correlation, a convergence of data from different sources that pointed to one man. The legal reckoning. Ames pleaded guilty. The evidence, bank records, transaction timelines, and his own admissions, was overwhelming. He received life in prison without parole. His wife, implicated in handling and laundering payments, was convicted and served time. Legal closure does not equal moral closure. A sentence can punish the traitor, but it cannot restore the people whose lives were destroyed. It cannot undo the diplomatic distrust that followed. It cannot unring the bell of exposed human networks, the human aftermath. Arrests are noisy for the investigators and seismic for families. Ames's arrest was the morning that changed everything for those close to him. Neighbors whispered. Children asked questions they had no business asking. A career that looked stable and respectable turned into a headline. CIA analyst arrested in espionage case. For the families of betrayed assets in faraway places, the shock was deeper. A knock in the night can mean disappearance. A sudden silence on a phone line can mean detention. The human stories are raw. A mother who never learned the truth about her son. A wife who waited months for news that never came. These are the real costs of betrayal. Institutional fallout, rebuilding and reform. The agency responded with structural changes. Financial oversight was tightened. Audits moved from periodic to routine. Polygraphs and psychological screening policies were reworked. Case files were compartmentalized and redundancy introduced. No single person would again be the only repository of a network's keys. These reforms mattered. They reduced vulnerabilities. They made career officers aware that their personal finances could be subject to scrutiny. But they also introduced new dilemmas, increased oversight risks, chilling the frankness that effective fieldwork requires. How do you compel transparency without turning your agency into a panopticon? Concrete steps taken after Ames. The CIA's reforms were practical and detailed. One major change was mandatory lifestyle audits for employees with access to sensitive information. Financial analysts were authorized to flag discrepancies and required to escalate them. Access to certain files moved to split control. 2 officers had to authorize key actions. Source payments were restructured so that no single official could administer all funds for a network. Audits moved from being periodic and reactive to continuous and proactive. Training also changed. Officers were taught to watch for non-traditional warning signs. sudden luxury purchases, unexplained absence, or an unusual eagerness to access certain files. Managers were told to ask uncomfortable questions and not smooth them over with assumptions about seniority or past performance. Trust as currency. The fallout spread beyond agency walls into diplomatic rooms and secure meetings with foreign partners. When a dossier handed to a friendly service becomes evidence of a leak, trust erodes. Some partners withdrew cooperation. Others demanded proof of reforms. Rebuilding trust required delicate negotiation, new safeguards, and time that cannot resurrect lost human lives. This is the geopolitical cost. When intelligence partnerships fray, national security suffers. Networks take years to rebuild. Recruitment dries up when potential assets fear exposure. The effect is measured both in missed information and in the human cost borne by those who remain vulnerable. Punishment, prevention, and care. Beyond policy documents, serious ethical questions hang in the air. What is an appropriate punishment for a betrayal that costs lives? The legal system provided one answer, but punishment alone is not a policy. Agencies must ask, how do we care for the victims? How do we compensate or protect families left exposed? What obligations exist to those who served us in secret and paid the ultimate price? Those are moral questions with no neat administrative solution. Prevention involves both technical fixes and cultural change. Better financial monitoring, mandatory escrow accounts for source payments, and split access protocols for sensitive networks are practical steps. Cultural change requires encouraging staff to report anomalies and protecting the whistleblowers who do. Who else knew? Even after the arrest, questions lingered. Were there co-conspirators? Who knew and looked away? How much of the flow of funds moved through third parties? Investigations reduced uncertainty, but not completely. Some threads remain part of closed files. The unknowns remind us that even solved cases can leave residual risk. Stories that matter. Numbers are tidy, lives are not. In one capital, a family waited on a front porch for a loved one who never returned. In another city, an informant's connection broke and never mended. A man who walked into a safe house to pass a note one night never walked back out. These are not dramatic set pieces. They are quiet, human tragedies. Institutions can talk about audits and reforms, but healing requires acknowledging the human victims. It requires memorials, compensation, and public honesty where possible. It requires not treating those exposed as collateral damage in an internal scandal designed for failure. Ames's story teaches that systems must be built assuming failure. Design defaults that assume an insider might turn. Spread knowledge. Use redundancy. Make routine checks normal. Reward the analyst who questions odd deposits rather than stigmatize their curiosity. And remember the most practical point: small patterns matter. A bank deposit that looks like an anomaly may be the first sign of a larger rot. A junior clerical worker who flags an odd entry may be doing the real work of national security. The cost of silence. Aldrich Ames is serving life. The agency reformed. But the families and sources who disappeared carry a different sort of sentence, one that does not end in a courtroom. The Ames case is a brutal reminder that betrayal is not just a policy failure. It is a human catastrophe. So what should we do? Strengthen oversight, protect whistleblowers, care for victims, and never forget that the smallest anomalies often tell the biggest truths.